A cold autumn evening shrouded New York City in a foggy veil. An elegant black Mercedes was gently rolling along the streets of the East Side, leaving behind the glitter and luxury of Manhattan. Behind the wheel was William Blackwood, a well-known businessman and philanthropist whose name often appeared on the front pages of newspapers. William rubbed his eyes tiredly. The charity event had lasted late into the night, and now all he wanted was a hot bath and a soft bed. Suddenly, his eyes caught sight of a small figure on the sidewalk. A girl, no older than 10 years old, stood alone under the dim light of a street lamp. William hesitated. Usually, he didn't pay attention to street children. There were too many in the neighborhood. But something about this girl made him slow down. "Hey, you," he called out, rolling down his window. "What are you doing here so late?" The girl slowly turned her head. Her big gray eyes looked at William with a strange mixture of fear and hope. "I was lost," she answered quietly. William felt something tighten in his chest. He got out of the car and walked closer. "Where are your parents?" he asked, trying to speak softly. The girl looked down. They're gone." William frowned. Something in the girl's voice seemed strange to him. He looked at her more closely. Dirty clothes, disheveled hair, but under the layer of dirt, a delicate face with fine features could be seen. "What is your name?" William asked. "Lizzie," the girl answered after a pause. "Listen, Lizzie." William crouched down to be on the same level as her. "You can't stay here alone. Let me help you." Lizzie looked up at him, and William suddenly felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Those eyes, they seemed familiar. You really want to help me?" she asked incredulously. William nodded. "Yes, I do. I can take you to a safe place where they can help you find your family." Lizzie hesitated for a moment, but then shook her head. "No, I don't have any relatives. I'm alone." William felt his heart clench with pity. He knew he couldn't just leave this girl here. Then maybe. He was silent for a moment, realizing that what he was about to say could change everything. "Maybe you want to come with me. I have a big house and you'll be safe there until we decide what to do next." Lizzie's eyes widened in surprise. You're taking me to your house?" William nodded, trying to hide his own surprise at his decision. "Yes, if you're willing." Lizzie looked at him for a long time as if trying to read his mind. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll go with you." When they got into the car, William felt a strange excitement. He could not explain why he decided to help this girl, but something told him that this decision would change his life forever. On the way home, William glanced at Lizzie from time to time. She was sitting quietly, looking out the window at the city at night. Her face was calm, but her eyes were alert. "Are you hungry?" William asked, trying to break the tense silence. Lizzie turned her head slowly. "A little," she answered quietly. "Don't worry, I'll cook you something delicious at home," William said, trying to smile. Lizzie just nodded and turned back to the window. William felt a strange sensation overcome him. This girl was so silent, so closed off. What could have happened to her to make her like this at such a young age? When they arrived at a large mansion on the outskirts of town, Lizzie's eyes widened a little. William noticed this and said, "This is my home. There is plenty of room and you can stay as long as you like." Lizzie slowly got out of the car, looking around cautiously. "Let's go inside," William said softly, opening the door. When they entered, they were met by an elderly woman in a maid's uniform. "Mr. Blackwood, you're late," she said, but then her eyes fell on Lizzie. "Oh my God, who is this?" "Martha, this is Lizzie," William replied. "She's our guest. Please make her something to eat and prepare the guest room." Martha nodded, still looking at Lizzie in wonder. "Yes, sir. Please come into the kitchen and I'll get everything ready." When they sat down at the kitchen table, William was finally able to get a better look at Lizzie. In the bright light, he could see the bruises on her arms and the scratch on her cheek. "Lizzie," he began gently, "can you tell me what happened to you? How did you end up on the street?" Lizzie looked down at her hands. "I don't remember," she whispered. William sensed that she wasn't telling the whole truth, but decided not to press. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now. We'll deal with everything tomorrow." When Martha brought a bowl of hot soup, Lizzie's eyes lit up. She began to eat, and William noticed her shoulders relax a little. "Thank you," she said quietly when she was done. William smiled. "You're welcome. Now, maybe you should get some rest. Martha will show you to your room." When Lizzie left, William remained sitting in the kitchen, lost in thought. There was something about this girl that bothered him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen those eyes before. But where? And why did she seem so familiar? William sighed and rubbed his temples. Tomorrow he would figure it all out. For now, he needed to rest and think about what to do next with this mysterious girl who had burst into his life so unexpectedly. The sunlight was breaking through the heavy curtains when William Blackwood woke up the next morning. He lay staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the events of the previous night. The girl, Lizzie. He suddenly sat up in bed, realizing that it was not a dream. William quickly dressed and went downstairs. In the kitchen, he found Martha preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him. "Your coffee will be ready in a minute." "Thank you, Martha," William replied, looking around the room. "The girl's still asleep," Martha said, preempting his question. "I checked on her a few minutes ago." William nodded and sat down at the table. He felt a strange excitement he couldn't explain. What was he going to do with this child? Why had he decided to take her in the first place? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Lizzie appeared in the kitchen doorway. In the daylight, she looked even more frail and vulnerable than she had at night. "Good morning, Lizzie," William greeted her softly. "How did you sleep?" Lizzie slowly walked over to the table. "Fine, thank you," she replied quietly. "Sit down, dear," Martha suggested, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. "You need to eat something." Lizzie sat down and began to eat, but her movements were cautious, as if she was afraid that the food might be taken away at any moment. William watched her, feeling his heart clench with pity. What could have happened to this child to make her so wary? "Lizzie," he began carefully, "I think we need to talk about what happens next. You can't just live here without making it official." Lizzie looked up at him, and William felt that strange sense of repetition again. Do you want me to leave?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with fear. No, of course not," William hastened to reassure her. "I just think we need to contact the proper authorities to make sure everything is legal. Maybe we can find your relatives or—" "I don't have any relatives," Lizzie interrupted him, her voice suddenly firmer. "I've already told you that." William frowned. "But there must be someone." "There is no one," Lizzie cut him off. She put down her fork and pushed her plate away. "If you don't want me to stay here, I'll go." William felt panic grip him. He didn't want her to leave, and this feeling surprised him. "Lizzie, listen," he said, leaning toward her. "I don't want you to go. I just want to do the right thing. Do you understand?" Lizzie looked at him for a long time, as if trying to read his mind. Then she nodded slowly. "Good. What do you want to know?" William breathed a sigh of relief. "To begin with, maybe you could tell me a little about yourself. How old are you? Where are you from?" Lizzie hesitated for a moment. I'm 11. I'm from New York. And your parents? What happened to them?" Lizzie looked down. They died. A long time ago." William felt his heart clench. "I'm so sorry, Lizzie. How did you end up on the street?" Lizzie was silent for a long time, so long that William thought she wasn't going to answer. But then she spoke, and her voice was barely audible. "I ran away. From the orphanage. It was bad there. William frowned. Bad? What do you mean bad? Lizzie looked up at him, and William saw a pain in her eyes that shouldn't have been in a child's eyes. It's just bad, she said. I don't want to talk about it. William nodded, knowing not to push. Okay, Lizzie, we won't talk about it if you don't want to. He looked at Martha, who was standing by the stove, trying not to show that she was listening in on their conversation. Martha, he said, could you take Lizzie to the store? She needs some new clothes. Martha nodded. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Lizzie looked at William in surprise. You're buying me clothes? William smiled. Of course. You can't go around in these old rags. Lizzie looked down at her dirty clothes and smiled slightly for the first time in a long time. Thank you. When Martha and Lizzie left, William remained sitting at the table, deep in thought. There was something about this girl that bothered him. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. But what? William went to the window and looked outside. He saw Martha and Lizzie getting into the car. Lizzie looked back at the house, and for a moment their eyes met. And again, William felt this strange sense of familiarity. He returned to his office and sat down at his computer. Opening the search engine, he hesitated. What was he looking for? Missing children, orphanages with a bad reputation. He didn't know where to start. Hours passed, and William sat at his computer looking at articles about missing children, information about shelters in New York City, any clues that might shed light on Lizzie's story. But he found nothing concrete. When he heard the front door open, William quickly closed all the windows on his computer. He walked out of his office and saw Lizzie standing in the hallway with packages in her hands. She looked different in her new clothes, more normal. How was the shopping? He asked, trying to sound casual. Lizzie looked at him and smiled slightly. Good, thank you. William nodded. No need to thank me. Listen, Lizzie, I think we need to talk. Lizzie tensed. About what? William took a deep breath. About your past, about your family. I don't think you've told me everything. Lizzie took a step back, her eyes widening with fear. I don't know what you're talking about. William took a step toward her. Lizzie, please. I want to help you, but I can't do that unless you're honest with me. Lizzie looked at him for a long time, and William could see fear and hope struggling in her eyes. I can't, she whispered at last. You wouldn't understand. William knelt down in front of her so that he was level with her eyes. Try me. I promise I'll listen to you and not judge. Lizzie bit her lip, and for a moment William thought she was going to cry. But then she took a deep breath and said, Okay, I will tell you, but not here. Can we go somewhere where no one can hear us? William nodded. Of course. Let's go to my office. When they entered the office, Lizzie looked around nervously. William offered her a chair and sat down opposite her. So, Lizzie, he began gently, what do you want to tell me? Lizzie took a deep breath as if to gather her strength. I haven't been entirely honest with you, she began quietly. About the orphanage, it's true, but I ran away from there for a reason. William leaned forward, listening intently. There was this man, Lizzie continued, her voice trembling. He came at night, to the girls, and no one did anything. William felt anger and horror overcome him. Lizzie, you mean... She nodded, not letting him finish. I knew that if I stayed there, sooner or later... She trailed off, unable to continue. William felt his heart break with pain for this little girl. Lizzie, he said softly, you are very brave. You did the right thing to run away, and I promise you that I will do everything I can to protect you. Lizzie looked up at him, and William saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Really? William nodded. Really. We'll figure this out together, and I won't let anyone hurt you again. Lizzie suddenly stood up from her chair and rushed to William, hugging him. William froze for a moment in surprise and then gently hugged her back. Thank you, Lizzie whispered, and William felt his shirt become damp with her tears. In that moment, William realized that his life would never be the same again, and he was ready for that change. The next few days were a blur for William Blackwood. He tried to make Lizzie feel comfortable while thinking about how to legalize her stay in his home. Of course, he could have simply contacted social services, but after what Lizzie had told him about the shelter, William could not risk her safety. One morning, as William was having breakfast on the terrace enjoying the warm sunshine, Martha approached him with the phone in her hand. "Mr. Blackwood, you have a call," she said, handing it to him. William raised an eyebrow in surprise. Very few people knew his home number. "Who is it?" he asked. Martha shrugged her shoulders. "He didn't introduce himself. He said it was important." William picked up the phone and put it to his ear. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end of the line. William was about to hang up when he heard a quiet, hoarse voice. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." William felt a chill run down his spine. "Who is this? What are you talking about?" "The girl," the voice continued. "She is not yours. Give her back and we'll forget about this." William gripped the phone tightly. "I don't know who you are, but if you call again—" But the phone was already ringing with short beeps. William slowly lowered the phone, feeling his heart beating frantically. Who could have known about Lizzie? And why are they looking for her? "Are you okay, sir?" Martha asked, noticing his worried look. William tried to smile, but it didn't come out very convincingly. "Yes, Martha. Everything is fine. It's just an unpleasant call." He got up and headed for the house. He needed to think about what to do next. In the living room, William found Lizzie sitting on the couch flipping through a book. When he entered, she looked up and smiled slightly. "Good morning, William," she said. She had become a little more open these days, though she was still wary. "Good morning, Lizzie," William replied, trying not to show his concern. "What are you reading?" Lizzie showed him the cover. "Alice in Wonderland. I found it in your library." William nodded. "It's a good book. Do you like it?" Lizzie shrugged her shoulders. "Yes, it's interesting, although sometimes a little strange." William smiled. That's part of her charm. He sat down next to Lizzie, trying to collect his thoughts. "How do I tell her about the call?" "Lizzie," he began cautiously, have you noticed anything strange lately?" The girl tensed. "What do you mean?" William sighed. "I don't know. Maybe some strangers around the house? Or strange phone calls." Lizzie's eyes widened with fear. Have they found me?" William felt his heart clench. He didn't want to scare her, but he knew he had to be honest. "I don't know, Lizzie, but I promise you I will do everything I can to protect you." Lizzie suddenly stood up and went to the window looking out. "I can't stay here," she said quietly. "I'm putting you in danger." William walked over to her and put his hand on her shoulder. "Lizzie, listen to me. You're not going anywhere. We're going to figure this out together. Do you understand?" Lizzie nodded slowly, but William could see that she was still scared. "Good," he said, trying to sound confident. "Now how about we go for a walk in the park? The fresh air will do us both good." Lizzie nodded again, and they left the house. But William couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The park was quiet and peaceful. William and Lizzie walked along the alleys, enjoying the warm, sunny day. For a while, they managed to forget about their worries and just enjoy the moment. "William," Lizzie suddenly said, stopping at a fountain, "why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me." William thought for a moment. "You know, Lizzie, sometimes we do things we can't explain, but I feel it's the right thing to do. You deserve a better life, and if I can help you with that, I'll do my best." Lizzie looked at him for a long time, as if trying to figure out if she could trust him. Then she said quietly, "Thank you." They continued walking, but suddenly William noticed a man sitting on a bench nearby, staring at them intently. When their eyes met, the man quickly turned away and stood up, heading in the other direction. William felt his heart speed up. He took Lizzie's hand. "I think we should go home." Lizzie seemed to sense his tension and did not argue. When they got home, William immediately called his old friend, private investigator Michael Thompson. "Mike, I need your help," William said when he answered. "I'm in a difficult situation." "What's wrong, Willie?" Michael asked, concerned. William briefly told him about Lizzie and the strange phone call. "My God, Willie, what have you gotten yourself into?" Michael exclaimed. "You realize this could be dangerous, don't you?" William replied. "But I can't just give up on her. Will you help me?" Michael sighed. "Of course I will, but be careful. I'll come over tomorrow morning and we'll talk it over." After talking to Michael, William felt a little calmer, but he realized that this was only the beginning. Someone was looking for Lizzie, and he had to figure out who and why. In the evening, when Lizzie had gone to bed, William was sitting in his office reviewing documents. Suddenly, he heard a noise on the first floor. His heart beat faster. He quietly got up and went to the door. The corridor was dark and quiet. William carefully went down the stairs, trying not to make any noise. When he got to the living room, he saw that the window was open and the curtains were swaying in the wind. William quickly went to the window and looked out. In the darkness, he noticed a shadow moving quickly away from the house. His heart was pounding in his chest. Someone was in his house. He quickly closed the window and turned on the alarm. Then he went upstairs and checked Lizzie's room. The girl was sleeping peacefully and didn't seem to notice anything. William returned to his office and sat down at his desk, feeling his hands shaking. He realized that the situation was much more serious than he had initially thought. Someone wasn't just looking for Lizzie. They already knew where she was and were willing to do anything to get her back. William pulled out the gun he kept in his drawer just in case. He never thought he would have to use it, but now he realized that any defense might be necessary. This night was going to be a long one. William knew he wouldn't be able to sleep. He had to protect Lizzie, no matter what price he had to pay. And he was up for the challenge. When the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the curtains, William was still sitting in his chair, staring intently at the darkness outside. He realized that this night was only the beginning. There were many challenges ahead, and he had to be ready for anything. The next morning, William woke up to the sound of the doorbell. He sat up sharply, realizing that he had fallen asleep in his office chair. The clock read 7 o'clock. William quickly walked to the window and saw the familiar car of his friend, private investigator Michael Thompson, in the driveway. Going downstairs, William opened the door. Michael stood on the doorstep holding a small suitcase. "Good morning, Willie," he greeted. "You don't look too good." William sighed. "Rough night. Come in. We have a lot to talk about." They went into the kitchen where Martha was already preparing breakfast. She looked at Michael in surprise but said nothing. "Martha," William said to her, "please make some coffee for two. And where is Lizzie?" "Still asleep, sir," Martha replied. "I checked on her a few minutes ago." William nodded and turned to Michael. "Good. We have some time to talk before she wakes up." They sat down at the table, and William told Michael in detail about everything that had happened in the last few days: the strange call, the man in the park, and the night visitor. Michael listened attentively, making notes in his notebook from time to time. "This is serious, Willie," he said when William had finished his story. "Do you realize you're involved in something very dangerous?" William nodded. "I do, but I can't just give up on Lizzie. You should have seen her eyes, Mike. There's so much pain and fear in them. I can't let her down." Michael sighed. "Okay, I understand. But we need to be careful. The first thing we need to do is find out more about Lizzie's past. You said she mentioned an orphanage?" William nodded. "Yes, but she didn't say which one. Only that it was dangerous." "Okay," Michael said. "I'll start by checking out all the shelters in New York. Maybe we can find some clues." At that moment, Lizzie entered the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the stranger. "Good morning, Lizzie," William said, trying to sound casual. "This is my friend, Michael. He's helping me with some things." Lizzie nodded cautiously but didn't move. Michael smiled at her. "Hello, Lizzie. It's nice to meet you." Lizzie slowly walked over to the table and sat down next to William. She looked tense and occasionally threw angry glances at Michael. "It's okay, honey," William said gently. "Michael is here to help us." Lizzie nodded slowly but still looked unsure. After breakfast, William took Michael to his office so they could talk privately. "What do you think?" William asked when they were alone. Michael scratched his chin thoughtfully. "She's obviously scared, Willie, and she's hiding something, but I don't think she's dangerous. I think she's in danger." William nodded. "I think so too, but from whom? That's what we need to find out," Michael replied. "I'll start the investigation with the shelters. And Willie, you have to be very careful. Someone is obviously watching your house." William sighed. "I know, but what am I supposed to do? I can't just sit here and wait for them to come after her." Michael put his hand on his shoulder. "Listen, I understand that you want to protect her, but you have to think about your own safety too. Maybe you should hire a bodyguard." William shook his head. "No, it might scare Lizzie. She's just starting to trust me." "Okay," Michael said, "but at least install extra security cameras. And be prepared for anything." William nodded. "Thanks, Mike. I don't know what I would have done without you." Michael smiled. "That's what friends are for. Now I'd better get going. I'll start my investigation right away." After Michael left, William returned to the living room to find Lizzie sitting on the couch with her hands on her knees. "Lizzie," he called softly, "are you okay?" The girl slowly raised her head. Is he going to come looking for me?" William sat down next to her. "No, dear. Michael is here to help us. He won't be looking for you. He's trying to figure out who the people are who are looking for you." Lizzie tensed. "I don't want them to find me." William gently put his arm around her shoulders. "I know, and I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you. But Lizzie, I need your help. The more you tell me, the better I can protect you." Lizzie was silent for a long time, and then she said quietly, "I can't. It's not safe." William sighed. "Lizzie, I understand that you're scared, but believe me, we are stronger together. We can get through this." Lizzie looked at him, and in her eyes William saw a struggle between fear and a desire to trust. "I'll try," she finally said, "but not tonight. I need time." William nodded. "Of course, dear, whenever you're ready." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, trying to get their minds off their troubling thoughts. William showed Lizzie his book collection, and they spent several hours discussing their favorite stories. But even in these peaceful moments, William could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. He would often go to the window, peering out into the street, looking for anything suspicious. In the evening, when Lizzie went to bed, William sat down at the computer trying to find any information that might help. He looked through news stories about missing children, reports on shelters, anything that might be related to Lizzie. Suddenly, his eyes were drawn to an article about a scandal in a New York City shelter. The article was dated 3 years ago. It talked about allegations of child abuse and suspicious disappearances. William's heart beat faster. This could be a clue. He quickly saved the article and sent it to Michael. As he was about to go to bed, his phone rang. It was Michael. "Willie, you won't believe what I found," he said excitedly. "I think we're on the right track, but this could be much more serious than we thought." William felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I'll tell you tomorrow," Michael replied. "But be careful. Keep Lizzie close. Don't leave her alone." When William hung up the phone, he felt anxious. Whatever Michael had found, it was clearly something serious. And William knew they would have to act quickly if they wanted to protect Lizzie. He quietly went upstairs and looked into Lizzie's room. The girl was sleeping peacefully, and for a moment William felt a pang of guilt. Was he doing the right thing by involving her in this investigation? But then he remembered the people who were looking for her and realized he had no choice. William returned to his office and spent a sleepless night waiting for the morning and news from Michael. He knew that they would face new challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them for Lizzie's sake. The sun had not yet risen above the horizon when William heard a knock on his office door. He sat up sharply, realizing that he had fallen asleep at his desk again. The clock read 6:23 in the morning. "Come in," he said, rubbing his eyes. Michael walked into the room looking like he'd been up all night too. "Sorry for the early visit, Willie," he said, sitting down across from him. "But what I found, it couldn't wait." William straightened up in his chair, feeling his heart begin to beat faster. "What did you find?" Michael took a folder out of his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Remember that article about the orphanage scandal you sent me? I dug deeper, and what I found, it's much more serious than we thought." He opened the folder and pulled out several photos. They showed children of all ages, all with numbers on their chests, like prisoners. "What is this?" William asked, feeling horrified. "It's not just an orphanage," Michael replied grimly. "It's part of a child trafficking network. They use orphanages as a front for their activities." William felt sick to his stomach. "And you think Lizzie is—" Michael nodded. "I'm pretty sure she was one of their victims, but there's something else." He pulled out another photograph and placed it in front of William. It showed a young woman with long, dark hair and sad eyes. "This is—" "Yes," Michael confirmed. "That's Emily, your ex." William felt the ground slipping away from under his feet. What does she have to do with this?" Michael took a deep breath. "She worked at one of these shelters as a social worker, but then she disappeared 3 years ago." William leaned back, feeling his head spinning. "Are you saying that—" "I think she found out what was going on," Michael said, "and she tried to do something about it, but they stopped her." William covered his face with his hands. "Oh my God." "There's something else, Willie," Michael continued carefully. "The timeline. It's consistent with the time you and Emily broke up." William looked up, his eyes widening with sudden realization, but he didn't dare voice his suspicion. "What do we do, Mike?" he asked instead. Michael sighed. "First, we have to protect Lizzie. If they are looking for her, they will stop at nothing. Second, we need more information. We need to find out what happened to Emily." William nodded. "I'll talk to Lizzie. Maybe she remembers something about the orphanage or Emily." "Be careful," Michael warned. "Don't push her. If she really went through what we think she did, it could have left her deeply traumatized." After Michael left, William stood by the window for a long time, trying to collect his thoughts. How would he talk to Lizzie? And should he say anything to her at all? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Lizzie. "Good morning," she said as she cautiously entered the office. "I heard voices." William tried to smile. "Good morning, Lizzie. Yes, that was Michael. He was bringing some news." Lizzie tensed. "Bad news?" William walked over to her and crouched down so he was level with her eyes. "Lizzie, listen to me. I know you're scared, and I understand why, but I want you to know that I will do anything to protect you. Do you trust me?" Lizzie looked at him for a long time as if trying to read his mind. Finally, she nodded. "Good," William said. "Then maybe we could talk. There are some things I'd like to ask you." Lizzie tensed again, but nodded. They went into the living room and sat down on the couch. "Lizzie," William began cautiously, Do you remember anything about the orphanage you lived in?" The girl's eyes suddenly filled with fear. "Why do you ask?" William felt his heart clench. We're trying to figure out who the people are who are looking for you, and we think it might have something to do with the orphanage." Lizzie looks down at her hands. I don't want to talk about it. It was a bad place. William took her hand gently. I understand, Lizzie, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Lizzie looked up at him, and William saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. You promise? I promise, he said firmly. They sat there for a while, just holding hands. Finally, William spoke again. Lizzie, do you remember any of the workers at the orphanage? Maybe there was a woman who was kind to you? Lizzie thought for a moment. There was one woman. She was kind, but then she disappeared. William felt his heart speed up. Do you remember what she looked like? Lizzie shook her head. Not really, but I have something. I was afraid to show you before. She got up and went to her room. A few minutes later, she returned holding a small locket. This is all I have left of her, she said, holding it out to William. William carefully took the locket and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a young woman with sad eyes. Emily. He felt his heart sink. There was no doubt about it now. Emily was connected to Lizzie. But in what way? William looked at the little girl who was watching him with concern in her eyes. He knew he couldn't tell her the whole truth right now. It would be too much for her to bear. Lizzie, he said softly. This woman, I knew her a long time ago, and I promise you we will find her. We're going to find out what happened to her. Lizzie's eyes widened in surprise and hope. You will? You'll help me find her. William nodded, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. Yes, Lizzie. We'll find her together, and we'll make sure you're safe. Lizzie suddenly rushed to him and hugged him tightly. William hugged her back, feeling his eyes fill with tears. He didn't know what lay ahead for them, but he was sure of one thing. He would do everything he could to protect this girl and uncover the secret of her past, even if it meant facing his own demons and past mistakes. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. William was constantly on the alert, checking every noise, every shadow outside the window. He installed additional security cameras around the house and hired a security guard to quietly patrol the grounds. Lizzie seemed to sense this tension. She became more silent, often sitting by the window, peering out into the yard with an anxious expression. One morning, when William came down to the kitchen, he found Lizzie looking at an old photo album she had apparently found in the library. Good morning, Lizzie, he greeted, trying to sound cheerful. What did you find there? Lizzie looked up and William saw that her eyes were red as if she had been crying. It's her, isn't it? The girl asked quietly, pointing to the photo. William walked closer and felt his heart sink. It was Emily, smiling and happy, standing next to him at a picnic many years ago. Yes, he said after a pause. That's Emily. Lizzie stared at the photo for a long time and then looked up at William. You were together? William sighed and sat down next to her. Yes, Lizzie, we were together for a long time. But then, we broke up. Why? Lizzie asked, and William heard a note of accusation in her voice. He felt a sense of guilt overwhelm him. How to explain the complexities of adult relationships to a child? It's complicated, Lizzie. Sometimes adults do stupid things. They make bad decisions. Lizzie continued to stare at him as if waiting for more explanation. William took a deep breath. I was young and ambitious. I thought only about my career, about money, and I left Emily because I thought she was standing in the way of my dreams. He felt tears coming to his eyes. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I regret it every day. Lizzie was silent for a long time, thinking about his words. Then she said quietly, she used to cry a lot, when she thought no one was watching. William felt his heart break. Did you know her well, Lizzie? The girl shrugged. Not very well. She worked at the orphanage. She was nice to us. But then, she just disappeared. William leaned closer. Lizzie, can you tell me more about the orphanage? About the people who worked there? Lizzie tensed, her eyes filled with fear. I don't want to talk about it. I know it's hard, William said gently, but it could be very important. It could help us find Emily and understand who the people are who are looking for you. Lizzie remained silent for a long time, fighting her inner fear. Finally, she spoke softly. There was a man. He was tall, with gray hair. Everyone was afraid of him. He took children away, and they never came back. William felt horrified. Took them? Where? Lizzie shook her head. I don't know, but I heard Emily arguing with him once. She was yelling that she was going to tell everyone what he was doing, and then she was gone. William gently put his arm around Lizzie's shoulders. You're very brave to tell me this, and I promise you that we will find Emily and stop these bad people. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Michael. Willie, I have some news, he said tensely. And it's not good. What's wrong? William asked, feeling his heart speed up. I found information about that man you were talking about. He's gray-haired, tall. His name is George Hunter, and he's a very powerful man, Willie. He has connections in the government, in the police. If he's really behind all this, William felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. What are you suggesting? We need help, Michael replied. I know a journalist we can trust. Maybe if we can get this information out there. No, William interrupted him sharply. It's too dangerous. We can't risk Lizzie's safety. But Willie, I said no, William repeated firmly. We'll find another way. He hung up the phone and turned to Lizzie, who was watching him with concern in her eyes. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. William tried to smile, but it didn't come out very convincingly. Yes, dear. Everything will be fine, I promise. But deep down, he felt that the situation was getting more and more dangerous, and he wasn't sure if he could protect Lizzie from whatever was coming. That evening, after Lizzie had gone to bed, William sat in his office reviewing all the information they had gathered. He felt they were close to solving the case, but there was still something missing. Suddenly, his eyes fell on an old photo of Emily, and then it hit him. He quickly dialed Michael's number. Mike, I think I know where to find Emily, he said excitedly. Do you remember that old house of her parents in the country? The one where we used to spend our summer weekends? Yeah, but I'm sure she's there. It's the only place she'd go if she was hiding. Willie, it's not safe. If you're right and she's there, those people might know about it too. William was silent for a moment, thinking about the situation. I know, but we have to take the risk. For Lizzie's sake, for Emily's sake. Michael sighed. Okay, but we can't go in there unprepared. Give me a day to get everything organized. William agreed, feeling the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He knew it could be a trap. He knew he was risking everything. But he also knew he couldn't just sit there and wait for Hunter and his men to find them. The next morning began with an unexpected call. William was having breakfast with Lizzie when his phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Hello? He answered cautiously. Mr. Blackwood, said a woman's voice that sounded familiar. Don't say anything. Just listen. I know about the girl, and I know you're looking for Emily. William felt his heart begin to beat faster. Who are you? It doesn't matter, the woman replied. What matters is that I can help you, but you must act quickly. They are coming. Who are they? William asked, trying to remain calm in front of Lizzie, who was watching him closely. Hunter's men. They know where you are, and they're coming for the girl. William felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. What do we do? Meet me in an hour at the Blue Cup Cafe on Main Street. Come alone, without the girl. And be careful, you might be followed. The connection was cut off, leaving William in a state of shock and confusion. "Are you okay?" Lizzie asked quietly. William tried to smile, but it didn't come out very convincingly. "Yes, dear, it's just work stuff. Listen, I'm going to have to go out for a while. You stay with Martha, okay?" Lizzie nodded, but her eyes were worried. William quickly called Michael and briefly told him about the call. "It could be a trap, Willie," Michael warned. "I know it could be, but it could also be our only chance. Just keep your eyes open, okay?" An hour later, William was sitting in the Blue Cup, looking around nervously. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman with dark glasses approached his table. "Mr. Blackward?" she asked quietly. William nodded, and the woman sat down across from him. "My name is Rebecca," she said, taking off her glasses. "I worked with Emily at the shelter." William felt his heart speed up. "Do you know where she is?" Rebecca shook her head. "No, but I know what happened the night she disappeared." She leaned closer and began to whisper. "Emily found evidence that Hunter was selling children overseas. She wanted to expose him, but he found out. That night he came for her. I saw him threaten her, but Emily, she was strong. She said she had evidence that she hid in a safe place, and that if anything happened to her, that evidence would go to the police." William felt horrified and excited at the same time. And then what happened? Hunter was furious. He ordered his men to find the evidence, and Emily, she just disappeared. I thought that he had killed her. But then I started hearing rumors that she'd run away and was hiding somewhere. "And Lizzie?" William asked. "What does she have to do with any of this?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "Lizzie. Emily took special care of her. I think Lizzie knows where the evidence is. That's why Hunter is so desperate to find her." William felt his head spin at this information. "What do we do?" "You have to find Emily," Rebecca said firmly. "She's the only one who can stop Hunter. And you have to protect Lizzie at all costs." Suddenly, Rebecca tensed and quickly put on her glasses. "I have to go. We're being followed." She stood up and quickly walked toward the exit, leaving William in a state of shock and confusion. When he returned home, he was met by an excited Martha. "Mr. Blackward, thank God you're back. Lizzie, she's gone." William felt the ground slipping away from under his feet. "What? How did that happen?" "I don't know," Martha answered, barely holding back her tears. "She was in her room and then I went to make lunch, and when I came back she was gone." William rushed to Lizzie's room, desperately looking for any clues. Then he noticed a note on her pillow. "I'm sorry. I can't put you in any more danger. I know where Emily is. I have to find her." William felt his heart breaking with fear and despair. He grabbed his phone and dialed Michael's number. "Mike, Lizzie is missing. She's gone to find Emily. We have to find her before it's too late." "Calm down, Willie," Michael replied. "We'll find her. I have an idea where she might have gone. Meet me at Emily's old mansion in 20 minutes. William ran out of the house, feeling the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He knew that every second counted. Lizzie was out there, somewhere in the dark, alone and scared. And he had to find her before Hunter's men did. As he drove to Emily's estate, his mind was in chaos. He remembered all the moments he had spent with Lizzie, her sad eyes, her cautious smiles. He couldn't lose her, not now that he finally realized how important she was to him. "Hold on, Lizzie," he whispered as he stepped on the gas. "I'm coming for you." Emily's old mansion looked gloomy in the light of the setting sun. William stopped the car at the gate where Michael was waiting. "Are you sure they're here?" William asked, jumping out of the car. Michael nodded. "Almost. I checked the security footage in the city. Lizzie got on a bus going in this direction, and then I noticed a woman who looked like Emily on the video buying groceries at a local store." They cautiously approached the house. The windows were dark, but William noticed a faint ray of light coming through the curtains on the second floor. "There's someone there," he whispered. They quietly went up to the porch. William took a deep breath and knocked on the door. At first, there was silence. Then they heard footsteps. The door slowly opened and Emily stood in front of them. She looked older than William remembered, with gray hair and tired eyes, but it was her. "William?" she gasped, her eyes widening in shock. "Emily." William felt his throat tighten with emotion. "We're here to help. Is Lizzie here?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside, letting them in. "She's upstairs. How did you find us?" "It's a long story," Michael answered, looking around the room with a professional look. "But right now, the important thing is that we need to get you both out of here. It's not safe for you to stay here." They went upstairs and found Lizzie in a small bedroom. She was sitting on the bed with her arms around her knees. When she saw William, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to run away, but I had to find her." William went over and gently hugged Lizzie. "It's okay, sweetheart. I understand. But don't ever do that again, okay? You really scared us." Emily watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and concern. "William, what's going on? How do you know Lizzie?" William took a deep breath. "It's a long story, Emily. But to make a long story short, I found Lizzie on the street a few weeks ago. And since then, I've been trying to protect her and figure out what's going on." Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. "I didn't know. I thought I could protect her on my own. But they kept coming after us." "Hunter?" Michael asked. Emily jerked her head up. "You know about Hunter?" Michael nodded. "We know enough to know how dangerous he is. That's why we need to get you both out of here as soon as possible." Emily stood up and walked over to the old dresser. She pushed open the bottom drawer and pulled out a plastic-wrapped folder. "Here is the evidence of his crimes. I've kept it all these years, hoping to find a way to use it without putting Lizzie in danger." William took the folder, feeling its weight, not only physically but also mentally. "We will pass this on to the appropriate authorities, but right now, the most important thing is your safety." They quickly gathered the necessary things and left the house. Night had already fallen on the city and the streets were empty. When they got into William's car, Lizzie suddenly asked, "Where are we going now?" William looked at Emily and then at Lizzie. "Home," he said softly. "We're going home." Emily looked at him in surprise but said nothing. She simply took Lizzie's hand and squeezed it tightly. As they drove out onto the highway, William felt the tension of the past few weeks begin to release. He knew there were still many challenges ahead: explanations, legal procedures, emotional healing. But now, as he looked in the rearview mirror at Emily and Lizzie, talking quietly in the back seat, he felt that for the first time in a long time, everything was going to be okay. "We'll make it," he whispered to himself. "Together." And the car continued its journey into the night, taking them to a new beginning. The next few days passed in a blur. William, Emily, and Lizzie settled into William's house, trying to adjust to their new reality. Michael worked on handing over the evidence against Hunter to the appropriate authorities, ensuring their safety in the process. One morning, when William came down to the kitchen, he found Emily making breakfast. She looked tired, but more relaxed than in the early days. "Good morning," he greeted as he poured himself a cup of coffee. Emily turned around and smiled weakly. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" "Not bad," William replied, although in reality he had barely slept, thinking about everything that had happened and what might still happen. "Where's Lizzie?" "Still sleeping," Emily said as she flipped the pancakes in the pan. "She had a rough day yesterday." William nodded, remembering how Lizzie had cried herself to sleep as she experienced another return of nightmares. "Emily," he began carefully, "we need to talk." She froze for a moment, then slowly turned to him. "I know." They sat down at the table, and for a few minutes there was silence, neither of them knowing where to begin. "Why didn't you tell me?" William finally asked, his voice quiet but his pain was palpable. "About Lizzie, about her being my daughter." Emily took a deep breath. "I have, many times, but you left, William. You said your career was more important than anything, and when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't want you to come back just because you felt obligated." William felt his heart clench with guilt and regret. "I was a fool, Emily. The biggest fool in the world, if I had known, but you didn't." Emily interrupted him gently. "And maybe that's for the best. You're a different man now, William. I can see it in the way you look at Lizzie, the way you care for her." William rubbed his eyes, feeling the tears begin to well up. "I've wasted so much time, so many moments of her life." "There will be time," Emily said, gently touching his arm. "If that's what you want." William looked into her eyes. "More than anything in the world." At that moment they heard footsteps on the stairs, and a sleepy Lizzie entered the kitchen. She froze when she saw them at the table. "Good morning, sweetie." Emily smiled. "Would you like some pancakes?" Lizzie nodded and sat down at the table, looking from William to Emily. Have you been fighting?" "No, dear," William replied. "We were just talking about the past and the future." Lizzie frowned. "What future? Are we staying here?" Emily and William exchanged a look. "What would you like, Lizzie?" Emily asked cautiously. The girl thought for a moment, then said quietly, "I want us to be together, all three of us." William felt his heart fill with warmth. "I think that can be arranged," he said, smiling. Suddenly William's phone rang. It was Michael. "Willie, I've got some news," he said in a tense voice. "Hunter's been arrested." William felt a mixture of relief and anxiety wash over him. "That's good, right?" "Yes, but there's a problem. He's demanding a plea deal, and he's willing to talk about anything and everything." William took the hint. "He knows about Lizzie?" "Yes," Michael answered, "and about Emily too. They want you both to testify." William took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Okay, what do we do?" "Come to the police station in 2 hours. I'll be there with a lawyer." "Don't worry, we'll get it all sorted out." When William hung up the phone, he saw that Emily and Lizzie were looking at him with concern. "What happened?" Emily asked. William briefly explained the situation. Emily turned pale but nodded with determination. "We have to do this, for Lizzie's sake and for the sake of all the other children." Lizzie looked scared. "Do I have to go too?" William hugged her. "No, dear. You stay here with Martha. We'll be back soon, I promise." The ride to the police station was tense silence. William could feel his hands trembling on the steering wheel. Emily sat next to him, looking out the window with an expressionless face. When they arrived, Michael was already waiting for them with a tall man in a suit who introduced himself as their lawyer. "Everything will be fine," Michael said, trying to sound confident. "Just tell the truth." The next few hours passed in a blur. William and Emily took turns testifying, telling everything they knew about Hunter and his organization. They talked about the orphanage, the missing children, the threats and harassment. When it was over, they left the police station feeling emotionally exhausted. The sun was already setting, painting the sky in bright shades of orange and pink. "You did great," Michael said as he walked them to the car. "Your testimony will help put Hunter away for years to come." William nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. "Now what?" "Now," Michael said, "you go home and start a new life. No fear, no persecution, just live." On the way home, William and Emily were silent, each deep in thought. But when they arrived at the house, Emily suddenly took William's hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." William squeezed her hand back. "It's me who should be thanking you for Lizzie, for being so strong. When they entered the house, Lizzie rushed to meet them, hugging them both at the same time. "You're back! I was so worried!" William picked her up, feeling his heart fill with love. "We will always come back to you, sweetheart. I promise." That night, after Lizzie was asleep, William and Emily sat on the terrace looking up at the starry sky. "What now?" Emily asked quietly. William turned to her. Now we start over, if that's what you want." Emily looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I want to try, for Lizzie's sake, and for us." William took her hand gently. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I promise I'll do my best to be better, for you and for Lizzie." Emily smiled weakly. "We all deserve a second chance, William, and I think we've already started to use it." They sat there for a long time, holding hands and looking up at the stars, feeling the beginning of a new life unfold before them, a life full of challenges but also full of love and hope. And somewhere deep down, William knew that everything was going to be okay now. Not perfect, not without problems, but okay, because now they were together, and together they could overcome anything. 6 months have passed since the day William, Emily, and Lizzie started their new life together. It seemed that the worst was over. Hunter was behind bars, and the trial of him and his accomplices was nearing completion. However, as is often the case in life, the calmness was deceptive. One sunny Sunday morning, as the family was having breakfast on the terrace, William's phone rang. It was Michael, and he sounded tense. "Willie, we're in trouble. Hunter has made a statement in court. He claims to have evidence against you." William felt the blood drain from his face. "What evidence? What is he talking about?" "He says you were involved in his scheme, that you knew about everything and benefited from it." "That's nonsense," William exclaimed, drawing concerned looks from Emily and Lizzie. "I know," Michael replied, "but he has some documents that seem to prove it. The prosecutor's office has already taken an interest." William took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What should we do?" "Come to my office, right away. We need to get this sorted out before it gets out of hand." When William hung up the phone, he saw Emily and Lizzie looking at him with concern. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. William briefly explained the situation, trying to sound calm for Lizzie's sake. But the girl wasn't stupid. She could sense the tension. "Is it because of me?" she asked quietly. "Because you saved me?" "No, sweetheart." William hugged her. "It's not because of you, it's just a grown-up thing. But we'll figure it out, I promise." Emily stood up, her face determined. "I'm coming with you." William wanted to argue but realized it was useless. They were in this together, to the end. "Good," he said. "Lizzie, will you stay with Martha?" The girl nodded, but her eyes were full of fear. "You will come back, won't you?" "Of course." Emily hugged her. "We always come back, remember?" The ride to Michael's office was in tense silence. William was trying to figure out what kind of evidence Hunter could have. He had never been involved in his crimes, but could he have somehow inadvertently helped him? Could his charitable contribution somehow be connected to Hunter's shelters? When they arrived, Michael was already waiting for them with their lawyer. "Here are the documents Hunter submitted to the court," Michael said, spreading the papers on the table. William and Emily leaned over them. There were bank statements that purportedly showed transfers of funds from William's company to offshore accounts linked to Hunter. There were also copies of emails discussing some special deliveries. "It's all fake," William said, feeling anger rising in him. "I've never done anything like this." "We know," the lawyer replied, "but these documents look very convincing. We need to prove that they are fake." "But how?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with fear and anger. Michael took a deep breath. "I have an idea, but it's risky." Everyone turned to him. "We know that Hunter had allies in high places. people who helped him cover up his activities. If we can find one of them and convince them to testify against Hunter. But who would do that? William asked. They're all afraid of Hunter. There is one person, Michael said slowly. Hunter's former partner, Robert Greene. He retired a few years ago, but I'm sure he knows a lot. And you think he'll be willing to help? Emily asked skeptically. Michael shook his head. Not willingly, but I have dirt on him. If we press him. William felt doubt grip him. Is that right? We're no better than Hunter if we do this. Emily took his hand. William, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. If that's the only way to protect our family. William looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. Okay, what do we need to do? The next few days passed in a blur. Michael and his team worked around the clock, gathering information on Robert Greene and preparing a plan of action. William and Emily tried to remain calm for Lizzie's sake, but the tension was felt in their every gesture, in their every look. Finally, the day of the meeting with Greene came. William and Michael went to his country house, leaving Emily and Lizzie under guard. Greene greeted them with the cold politeness of a rich man accustomed to uninvited guests. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" he asked, inviting them into his office. Michael unceremoniously laid a folder of documents on the table. "We know about your involvement in Hunter's case, Mr. Greene, and of your own antics." Greene paled, but quickly composed himself. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," William replied, feeling his voice tremble with tension. "And you have a choice. You can help us prove the innocence of innocent people and stop Hunter once and for all, or we can turn these documents over to the police." Greene looked at them for a long time, his face impenetrable. Then he nodded slowly. "What do you want to know?" For the next few hours, Greene told them everything, about how Hunter set up his network, how he bribed officials and police, how he falsified documents, and how he planned to frame William to save himself. "He always had a backup plan," Greene said wearily, "and he was always willing to sacrifice anyone to save his own skin." When they returned home, Emily greeted them with concern in her eyes. "What happened? Did you get what you needed?" William nodded, feeling both relieved and tired. "Yes, Greene has agreed to testify. With his testimony and the evidence he provided, we can prove my innocence and finally bring down the Hunter empire." Emily hugged him, and William felt the tension of the last few days finally release. "Dad! Mom!" Lizzie's voice rang out, and the girl ran out of the living room, throwing herself into their arms. William picked her up, feeling his heart fill with love and gratitude. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything is going to be okay now." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of court hearings, depositions, and endless meetings with lawyers. But every day it became clearer that the truth was finally winning. And then the day of the last court hearing came. William, Emily, and Lizzie sat in the courtroom holding hands as the judge announced the verdict. On the basis of the evidence presented, the court finds George Hunter guilty of all charges and sentences him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. All charges against William Blackwood are dismissed for lack of evidence. The courtroom erupted in cheers, but William could only hear Lizzie's joyful scream and feel Emily's grip on his hand. When they left the courthouse, they were met by a crowd of journalists. But William simply walked past them, holding the hands of the two most important people in his life. At home, they sat on the terrace watching the sun set over the horizon. Lizzie fell asleep on Emily's lap, exhausted from the day's emotions. "What now?" Emily asked quietly, looking at William. He smiled, feeling his heart fill with hope. Now we just live, together, like a family." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. Like a family. And as night fell on the city, William knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, stronger than ever, ready for any challenge. But most importantly, full of love and gratitude for the second chance life had given them.